There we go. Welcome in, State of the Nation. It is January 19th. I believe I got that right. Tyler Yaremchuk, joined by Josh Park, Zach Lang, Nation Dan as well. And we are here, as we are every week, live on Twitch, live on Twitter as well. We are going to discuss the 1-3 Edmonton Oilers. And it has not been a great start to the year. And this is the big question I'm going to start by going around the horn to everyone with. Is this a bad team playing the way they should play, a bad team playing bad, or is this a good team going through a rough stretch? I'll start with you, Dan.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the same team we had last year, except it's better. So it should be a better team than we had last year. There's stuff that will come around. Our power play will not be this bad going forward. You can't go from being historically, I mean, you can, but this team won't go from being historically the best, one of the best teams ever to, what we've seen in the last few games. Yeah. Mikko Koskinen's been great. Mikko Koskinen's been a yes, he's let in some bad goals, but he's also been left out to dry by his team for most of them. So yeah, this is going to be a better team than what we're seeing right now. We came up against some good teams. Montreal is surprisingly a lot better than I thought they were to begin the season, I think, as well. So, yeah.
Zach, are the problems they're going through right now fixable or not fixable?
Oh, yeah, they're totally fixable. I mean, it's only 4 games into the season here, right, Tyler? I mean, It's still so fresh into the year that there's so much overreaction going on surrounding what's happening, right? Like, there was no preseason games. There was an extended training camp, and the difference in pace between a practice into a real NHL game is a lot different. And I think that's one of the reasons why our power play is struggling, right? Obviously, there's a huge change there in having Tyson Barrie on the point instead of Oscar Klefbom. And I think that is one of the big reasons why the power play has struggled so much to start the year. But it's not like there aren't other teams that are struggling on the power play too. Like the Minnesota Wild haven't scored on 16 opportunities. The Canucks haven't scored on 15 chances. So it's not just the Oilers that are having some of these woes in their game to start the year. And the nice thing is that it's still so early in the year that there's a lot of time left to fix what's going on.
Got some action already in the Twitch stream, which is where you can go leave your comments, ask us questions. We'll get to them. Josh Park, through 4 games. What are you sort of concerned about? Do you think that there are big problems here, or do you think it's just a couple of small things that they kind of need to fix to get this back on track?
Tyler, I think the thing for me that's most alarming around this team right now is, if we were sitting at the 5 game or the 4 game spot right now and looked at this team and said, okay, we're 1-3, and those three losses were like, 6-4 games, 5-3 games, 5-4 games, you'd say, okay, this is a team that scores a lot of goals. We're great up front, especially in the top 6. And a lot of the time it's going to come down to whether or not we can get that one big save from Mikko Koskinen. And over the last 3 losses that we've had, it's kind of been a weird situation where, looking at last night, we didn't score a goal. This is a team that's supposed to be high-powered offensively. We're supposed to be able to click on the power play. That's a whole nother story in itself, the power play situation. But I'd say the number one alarming thing for me right now is, this is a team that's supposed to be able to score goals, and losing games 3-0, 3-1. I guess Shore scored late last night, so 3-1. I'd say that's the most alarming thing for me, is this team's supposed to score goals, and the games that we do lose, it's surprising to see how low scoring they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think it was the Juice who pointed this out. Right now it's panic time, right? Everyone's worried. It's 1-3. What happens if you don't beat Toronto and you're 1-5 or anything like that? But how much different would the conversation be if just the power play clicked? Because if yesterday's game, if the power play was +2 instead of -1, they get at least a point. And all of a sudden you're 1-2-1, or maybe you win in overtime and you're 2-2. And it feels like the power play alone could have saved them last night. And that's something that happened last year. And it's not so far. The power play isn't saving them.
Well, that's where you can be happy and be positive about it, is the fact that Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are not going to be held off the score sheet for this many games this season. It's just not going to happen. You look at every 4-game stint from now on, I guarantee that they have more Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl names in it than there are right now. And that's something to be positive about. It's going to come around. They got to figure some stuff out. Like Zach said, he gave the stats right there. There's 2 teams that, haven't scored a power play goal at all. We have those at least. So yeah, you've got 2 of the best players in the league still on this team. The offense hasn't been there, but it's coming. It's going to come.
Sticking with the power play, Zach, what do they need to do to succeed? Because the thing that's driving me nuts is they're trying to pass the puck into the net. Like yesterday in the first period, Leon Draisaitl gets it in the slot. And for the last 2 seasons, that's hammer time, man. He's firing that thing. But he tries the cute backhand pass to McDavid. It results in nothing. What do you think they need to do here, Zach? Is it a personnel thing or is it just an execution thing?
Well, it's definitely not a personnel thing, Tyler. I mean, you look at it, it's Connor McDavid, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Leon Draisaitl out there for the most part. 3 of the most offensively gifted players in the entire NHL. And I think you're right. They're trying to do a little bit too much. I think we've seen a number of times where the Oilers have tried to look for Alex Chason down low at the side of the net and kind of that pass it into the net sort of situation and hope he can just hammer one in. But that's not going to work every time, right? Like Draisaitl and McDavid are 2 of the most lethal shooters in the league, and probably the most frustrating thing about their game that I've seen over the last 3 or 4 years has been their, I guess, reluctance sometimes to shoot the puck. Like Draisaitl's a 50-goal guy. Like there's no reason he shouldn't be ripping the puck anytime it's on his stick, right? So I think they're trying to do a little bit too much. And I think a situation last night where they know they're struggling on the power play and they end up giving up a shorthanded goal, and that zaps confidence that those guys have out there too, right? Like that's a killer. So it's going to be interesting to see. But the Oilers have a great chance against Toronto to kind of rebound because the Maple Leafs have taken the second most penalties in the league this year so far. And they've also allowed the second most goals when shorthanded. So there's no better chance than tomorrow night against Toronto to get things back on track.
Josh, would you do anything different to the power play? Would you be taking Chason off? Would you be trying to build 2 units instead of 1? Or do you think it's just a matter of time till they get it together?
Tyler, I think you just load up the top unit, stay with the same thing you've been doing. I think Zach's exactly right. You just got to rip pucks at this point. Just rip pucks on that. I feel like once they get a few in, they get kind of into a bit of a rhythm. And we thought that was going to happen with that one game where we went 2 for 4 or whatever it was. And we thought we were going to establish a rhythm at that point. I think the biggest thing right now is we just got to stop with the exterior passes. And Tyler, you're exactly right. Can't pass the puck into the net. We got to get it on Draisaitl's stick and get him into a bit of a rhythm, and we'll be good to go.
It seemed
and sorry, Tyler, I was just going to say, Jason Gregor actually just wrote an article for Oilersnation, and I clipped some of the videos there for him. But last year, the first 5 power play goals, do you guys remember who scored them?
Who scored the last 5 power play goals?
James Neal.
The first 5 goals were scored by James Neal. Yeah. So there's a perfect example right there. There's a guy that knows to shoot the puck. And I think that's been something that the team has been guilty of starting this season. Even with a guy like Jesse Puljujarvi, who I've found a lot to love with his game. Yeah. I find looking for that pass first before he's looking for that shot. And you hope that all these guys can take that on and take that shooting role. Like Chason, same thing. I think that's why a lot of people have been frustrated with him on the power play, because he's there to shoot the puck. And it just seems like everybody's a little timid right now. They're gripping the sticks a little bit tight. And like Zach said again, that shorthanded goal, those shorthanded goals that they've given up, that has to play into your head. And that has to play into your mind as to, we have a power play and we need to make something work out of this, but we also don't need to get scored on again, because that was the absolute dagger last night. So yeah, maybe you have to change it up, and maybe you bring a James Neal in where he just knows to shoot the puck at the net.
Neal and Haas are going to travel with the team, but no word if they're going to play against Toronto. For me, I'm not, if they're going to sit there and be like, well, we're worried because we're giving up shorthanded goals and we're timid and we're not confident, that would just drive me even crazier if they came out and said that, because I'm like, man, I don't care if you're timid or whatever. It's go time here. There's 2 points on the line, and if you're Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, you need to give it a little more. Draisaitl was someone specifically, I don't know if this is just me that saw it, but 10 minutes into the game yesterday, I was kind of like, Leon doesn't look like he has it tonight. And honestly, the only 2 shifts, at even strength at least, where I noticed him skating hard is when Dave Tippett had him with Connor McDavid. Other than that, Draisaitl just kind of floated around. And something he's done his whole career that drives me just bananas is when he goes for a change and he stops skating at the blue line and he just coasts to the bench. And I'm just like, when he's scoring 50 goals a year, I don't give a shit, because I'm like, you can skate to the bench as slow as you want. If you have 10 goals in the last 12 games, I don't care. But when you're struggling, it sort of is about the Oilers as a whole too, not just Draisaitl. But when there's a lack of effort, when Cassian's doing flybys, when Draisaitl isn't skating hard on the rush or skating hard off the ice, that's what just drives me nuts. Is it seems like something goes wrong, and this team right now is just kind of shrugging and going, well, nothing we can do about it now. Looks like another loss.
Well, and that's the disappointing thing too, is that, Leon Draisaitl is a leader on this team.
Yeah.
He's the one who should be skating hard to the bench every play. He's the one who should be producing offense. He and McDavid are two of the most dynamic offensive players in the league, and they've been held off the score sheet in 2 games in a row. That doesn't happen very often. There was a stat during the broadcast last night where the Oilers lost 15 games last year. The Oilers were 1-15 when Draisaitl didn't score a point last year. And some of that's obviously on the rest of the team, but it also just goes to show how much Edmonton relies on him for offense. And it's a simple facet. Those guys have to be better, and they have to be able to produce 5-on-5 for Edmonton.
Yeah. Brad Navy, right now this team is playing like they have 70-plus games ahead of them. And I see that a little bit, but at the same time, I think some people are treating this like it's a 20-game regular season. We're not even 10% into the season yet. If the Oilers weren't 500 and we were on game 25, that's when I'd be like, okay, you're 8 points out of a playoff spot or whatever you'd be at that point. That's when I'd be like, you got to pick up the pace here and start playing some playoff hockey. But I don't know, Josh. I don't know if you guys are going to agree with this, but Josh, do you think we're maybe just worrying a little too early, especially in a division where if you beat Toronto 2 games in a row, you're going to be in a playoff spot?
I think the number one thing that Oilers fans are looking for right now from this team is just a little bit of urgency. It just feels like there's a lack of urgency in every facet of the game right now for the Oilers, whether it's 5-on-5 on the power play. Tyler, you touched a little bit on Draisaitl and the body language. And one thing that I noticed in yesterday's game, especially in the third period on one of the power plays, is, this unit's been out there for 1 minute and 30 seconds and they're not getting anything generated. And you can tell there's a little bit of, angst coming into that group. And then all of a sudden Draisaitl thinks, okay, I'm going to do it myself. And I don't know if you guys saw it in the one play. He tries to go right through the middle himself and tries to meg the defender at the blue line. And it's just a turnover and fired all the way back down the ice again. It just feels like sometimes they set into a bit of a rhythm when things aren't going their way. And it's like, okay, what's next for us? And that's where I think the frustration is coming from for Oilers fans, because they see it happening with the team that we're supposed to be cheering for. And then it kind of comes onset to us. But should we be nervous at this point? I would say, I don't know, maybe partially. Obviously, there's a lot of hockey left to be played. This is a whole different conversation. Next Tuesday, we could be having an entirely different mood to this stream, depending on what happens with this 2-game swing with Toronto. But does the type of game that Toronto plays maybe suit more to the Oilers? Yes. Is it going to be more run and gun style? Does that favor a team that only scored 1 goal last night and it was shorthanded by a 4th-line player? I don't know. Does this help maybe Draisaitl, McDavid get into a bit of a rhythm, especially Nugent Hopkins, who personally, I don't know about you guys, but I need a lot more out of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins when you're playing with the best player in the world. But no, I think that the next 2 games are big. I know it's so early to say this is a must-win game, but the next 2 games to the Oilers are big.
Every game's probably a must-win game at this point, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, especially it's a 4-point swing in every game. So,
and that's the kind of the poisoning of the water that this 56-game season does. And I think you nailed it, Tyler, when you said that people are treating this like it's a 20-game season, and it's not to say that it's not troubling to see a slow start, but it's also totally understandable and totally acceptable in the sense that, if you go out to Toronto right now, first road trip, and you get 2 wins, it's a totally different conversation than what we've been having. You game up against a Montreal team that has a big defense, and you got to figure out how to be able to beat those teams for sure over the long stretch of the season in the next 7 games against Montreal. But Vancouver got us sleeping on the first game. McDavid absolutely danced them on the second game. So I don't know. It's one of those things. I understand why people are upset, and I understand that people's expectations are super high for this team. And I think we're also guilty of driving that narrative too by drinking the Kool-Aid for the last, month of the preseason here. But it's I don't know. I'm not in panic mode yet. It's frustrating for sure. And I think that you saw it with Tippett, especially when it came to the power play, because we got off of that power play 1 line a lot faster this last game than we have seen in the past. That team that power play line has been pushing the 2-minute power play mark all season last year, all through the play-in round as well. So it's there's definitely some frustration there, but it's definitely not something that we can't fix. And we have the 2 best players in the world right now on our team. So we're not done. It's just, we gotta figure some stuff out here on this road trip.
Oh yeah, 100%. Okay, I want to, we're doom and gloom right now and all of that, but let's talk a little positives here. I think there, 1-3 start, obviously not ideal. But I'll start with you, Zach. Anything you're pulling from these 4 games that you're going, hey, I didn't expect that, and it's been a pleasant surprise?
Jesse Puljujarvi. I thought he's looked tremendous through the first 4 games of the season for the Oilers. He's analytically, number-wise, he's struggling a little bit. He hasn't got any points yet. He hasn't found the back of the net. But he's doing all the little things right, and he's playing a different style of game than he played 3-4 years ago here in Edmonton. He's showing that he's willing to use his body. He seems to have put on some decent size in the last year or two over in Finland, and it's showing, and he's still got that lethal release. I think he's a guy who would be a prime candidate to get a bump up the lineup here sooner rather than later, because he's putting a lot of work in away from the offensive zone as well. So I think he's been a bright spot for me so far.
We might get into line combos specifically here in about 5 minutes, but Josh, is JP the biggest positive for you through 4 games, or is there another one?
JP's definitely in the top 3. I know this is kind of an easy cop-out answer, but I would say outside of the top 2, like let's say outside of Draisaitl and McDavid, the 3 players for me that I loved, obviously JP, Zach, you nailed it on that end. And then Yamamoto, and I've really liked Slater Kukuk's game. He just seems like a type of guy that kind of doesn't overstep what you need to do as a defenseman. Sometimes the best play, especially as a defender, is making the easy play. And he's a guy that makes that look easier than it actually is. He pucks off the wall. He's physical in his own end. He seems to have a knack for just getting the puck on the net. And we like having a guy that size who plays the game that simple. And I think a lot of people don't understand. He's actually a lot younger than you'd think. When you're picking up a free agent defenseman who is coming from another team, sometimes it's easy to think, he's kind of on the back end of his career. But this is a young guy. Nurse talked the other day about playing him in the OHL. And I think that's a big pickup for Holland. I personally think maybe outside of Tyson Barrie, he's been the best defenseman for the Oilers so far this season. And Kukuk would be the one guy that I point to, and he's looked really good.
Dan, Kuku, JP, is there even a Yamo? I like the Yamo point as well. I thought the first 2 games, Yamo was great, and not so much in these last 2. Same thing with Cahoon, actually, is what I'll say. I thought Cahoon clicked with Draisaitl really well in the first couple games, but since then it's kind of been meh. Dan, what about you? Positives?
Yeah, well, I mean, Zach, we said it. We talked about it on ON Radio there last Friday, and I said that if the hockey gods were on Jesse Puljujarvi's side, he has a goal by now.
Yeah.
And to Josh's point, Slater Kuku, might be the big signing that we have this offseason going forward with the team. Not even just talking about this year, but going forward, might be a solid guy to have brought in to replace somebody in that bottom 6. The bottom 2 pairing. But for me, it's Mikko Koskinen. Mikko Koskinen, for a guy that when coming into the season, we were looking at a platoon split between him and Smith. He has been, de facto handed the net for the next 7 or 8 games, and he hasn't burned us on anything. Yeah. There's no game where you look at it and you're like, man, if Mikko could have just had 1 or 2 saves. I know that's partly to do with the offense, but the goals that have gone in have been the defense just absolutely letting him down, then playing the swarm defense there for the first couple of games. And then it's, it's the little things. And yes, again, he'd love to get the save here or there, but the team's not scoring to make it worth his while anyway. So I'm happy with what Mikko Koskinen has done so far. Hopefully we can figure out this stupid NHL waiver wire setup that they just and for a league, you understand that some of the things they just weren't foreseeable, but what are we talking about here? Why has Anton Forsberg been picked up 3 times and never played a game? Why is Aaron Dell a New Jersey Devil now? It doesn't make any. The Devils have they're collecting their set of goaltenders. It's frustrating from a standpoint of a team that's dealing with it, of course, but then it's also just on a player level. It's like, man, these guys want to be able to have some kind of stability. These guys want a chance. Yeah. Aaron Dell deserves a chance to play somewhere if he gets that opportunity. Same thing with I can't even remember the goalie that we picked up from the Kings. What's his name?
Troy Grosnick.
Yeah, Grosnick. Grosnick deserves a chance to play in the NHL. Kat Silverman made a good point with him. It's frustrating to have the league have an oversight like this, and we're just going to have to deal with it for a season.
I wonder if it calms down at any point during the year. Or, Zach, do you think it's just going to go the next 2 months are going to be goaltending carousel? Aaron Dell is going to be a part of 9 organizations?
I have no idea what's going to happen, honestly. It's so hard to project, right? I mean, it's such a weird sort of situation. And the rules that are surrounding the whole taxi squad get a little hairy too, right? Where you have to send them down, like they have to pass through waivers to go on the taxi squad. And it creates this sort of an issue, right? And I think to an extent, it's a hard situation for a franchise like Edmonton to be in right now where, they've got Mike Smith down and they don't really have anybody else in the hopper. And maybe that speaks a little bit to the Oilers organizational depth at the position. But Forsberg was supposed to be that number 3 guy. And I mean, at the time when we signed Forsberg, there was no discussion really of a taxi squad or how it was going to work. Right. So, the last minute planning kind of bit the Oilers in the behind a little bit, but it's one of those situations where it could very well be a carousel for the rest of the year around the league. And it's kind of a joke as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it is a joke.
It kind of is. It's kind of stupid to see happening, but I mean, this is the way it is and this is what it's going to be, I suppose, right?
If the Devils waive Comrie, it's just going to set off another round of goalies going on waivers, literally.
Why?
Which I don't know if they're gonna, but...
You're right. But why did the Oilers not send down Mike Smith or make a transaction for Mike Smith? Like, where is the news about what's happening with Mike Smith? That's what's frustrating for me, because it's like, this is totally avoidable if we knew that he wasn't going to be playing the games, that we don't send Forsberg down and we don't lose Forsberg at that point. But here we are. Like, it drives me wild about this.
You know better than anyone, Tyler, but they're holding stuff like that in news regarding injuries pretty close to the cup this year, right?
And I think Gregor heard it was a knee thing potentially with Smith, but even that's weird to me because why was he good enough to back up day one? And essentially, I know the transaction came a few days later, but he essentially went from fine to LTIR in 15 hours. So that whole thing is weird to me.
And at the same time,
I think it was a warm-up, man.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it must have been. And then at the same time, somebody covering the Oilers, I can't remember who it was, but somebody came out and said, no, 100% for sure Mike Smith will be back, after the LTIR stint, after 13 games.
He must have had a setback.
Yeah,
because he played in all those scrimmages, right? All those ones that the Oilers had preseason, he played in all those scrimmages. He was practicing every day. He didn't even take an off day. There was no days where it was Mike Smith is unfit to play today. So I'm feeling he must have tweaked it in warm up or in a practice or something, because there's no way they wouldn't have sent Evan Bouchard down to the minors and then would have sent Bouchard to the taxi squad or something and then put Forsberg on the active roster if they thought this was going to happen. Yeah. And if they did know this was going to happen and they didn't do that, then that's just a complete miss. But
yeah, if you knew that there was a chance Mike Smith wasn't 100%, you definitely probably would have just thrown Bouchard down because he doesn't need waivers, kept Forsberg on the active roster just in case. So that does make me think that maybe he went on the ice at some point for morning skate and tweaked something. No clue. The whole situation was just weird.
Playing basketball with his kids.
Yeah.
Maybe it was an off-ice injury. Fell down the stairs.
2 games coming up against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Zach, you mentioned, maybe at some point here you'd like to see JP up on the top line with Connor McDavid. We were chatting about this a little bit before we went live as well. I'll start with you, actually, Dan. I'll go to you. Any lineup changes you'd like to see for tomorrow's game against the Toronto Maple Leafs?
No, I don't know. It's one of those things. I mean, I would like to see Ethan Bear get back into the game.
Me too.
And Caleb Jones. I don't think that it was all their fault. Darnell Nurse certainly didn't look amazing last night by any stretch. So, I get you set the young guys to send a message, but I don't know. I don't want that to continue. I hope Neal can get in there. I really do. I think that him on the power play would be perfect. If he's playing on our fourth line and then he's on our power play shooting the puck, I would like to see him in, but that depends on injuries there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, for me it's just the defense. I'd like to see Bear and possibly Jones get back into the game.
Josh Park, are you going Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, Yamamoto, or are you keeping that forward group the same?
I'm keeping Nuge on the top line with McDavid. I really think you got to. I think you just got to ride it out at this point. Something's going to prevail eventually. One thing I am going to change is I'm going to keep Nygaard in the top 9. I like him on that line with Puljujärvi and Turris. I like the speed he brings. Yeah. I think he's feisty on the forecheck, very similar to Yamamoto. Touching on Dan's point, I'm going to keep Jones out of the lineup. I haven't been impressed with him so far. I think it wouldn't hurt having a young guy sit a couple more games. Chris Russell's got to stay in the lineup. You've been giving up so many goals. You got to have a guy in there that's going to play a little more sound defensively. I don't like having him with Barrie necessarily because, just a combo of having two under 6 foot defensemen together. But at the same time, I think you got to bring Ethan Bear back in. I think Legason is okay to sit, but yeah, Nygaard stays in my top 9. And then at this point, I'm going to keep McDavid and Nuge together and just hope that Nuge can figure it out. And Cahoon, he's had lots of good chances. I liked his game, especially in the first game. I thought he had some good looks. I think it's just a matter of burying one for him.
Zach, what are you doing tomorrow?
Well, first of all, if James Neal's healthy, I'd be putting him on the 4th line over Alex Chason. I think it's time for Chason to maybe be one of the guys that sits up top and watches a couple games from above. I'd be putting Puljujarvi up on the top line with McDavid and Nugent Hopkins. I think Puljujarvi's earned a shot up there. He's looked really good so far this year. Like I was saying earlier, he's really impressed me. Cassian, get him a bump down to the 3rd line, and then defensively, Jones and Bear got to be back in there as far as I'm concerned. Chris Russell spent 5 minutes on the power play last night for God knows what reason.
That was hilarious.
Like I don't know what the hell was going on and why that happened. Obviously there was a ton of time, but you need to have those younger guys like Jones and Bear out there as far as I'm concerned. Bear played great last year, and I think Jones is just as good as Ethan Bear is. And Jones could be a guy who could slide up and play a little power play 2 minutes instead of Chris Russell, who is definitely not known for his offensive game. So that would be the way that I'd shake things up tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm just looking in the comments here on Twitch. Tris Trucker said, I find it hard to believe that there's not a better fit to take Chason off power play 1. That'd be my change tomorrow. That'd be a big one for me. Chason off power play 1. If Neal's healthy, that's his spot. But I'd have Puljujarvi or Yamamoto or even, I think, Womp TV. Yeah, Womp TV said he wants pool party there. And another one said they'd like to see Cassian or Yamamoto up there. Chason's been in that spot for too long, man, and he hasn't been producing. So Chason off the power play. Any one of those 4 names I mentioned, obviously Neal if he's healthy. I'd keep the top 6 the same for now, but if they don't get more sustained pressure at 5-on-5, I'd look to make a change there, even if it means McDavid's going back with Neal and Cassian. I would keep Jones out because I want Russell in the lineup. I agree with Josh, but I would bring Bear back in and take out William Lagesson. So that's how I would kind of roll things out tomorrow. So we got a 4-game road trip coming up here. That means there are 2, 4, 6, 8 points on the line against the, I know it's a longer road trip than that, but we'll just look at the next 4 games here. How many points out of those 8 do you think the Oilers come home with, Dan?
5. I would say 5. They're gonna get a win in Toronto. I think they split in Toronto, and they might even lose in overtime, and then win another one of the 2. So 5 points for me.
I think 5's a safe play, and that's what I'd say too. I can see them going 2-1-1 over this next 4-game stretch. Zach Lang, what are you saying?
I was going to pick 5, but I'm going to go with 6 now. So the Oilers are going to go 3-1 over the next little stretch, and that's what's going to happen.
2-0-1.
2-0-2.
2-0-2. That's an option too. But I think they'll walk out with 6 points.
Josh Park.
I think they have to go 2-1-1. They have to go 2-1-1 at this point, and I think that's what people should be expecting. And if they do go 2-1-1, you should be happy with that.
Yeah, you absolutely should. All right. Thanks to everyone who tuned in to State of the Nation on Twitch and on our Twitter, and I think on our YouTube. I still can't figure out if we're going live on YouTube or not, but I'll get that sorted out soon. Thanks for everyone who tuned in. Enjoy the Oilers game, this edition of State of the